Now, across the globe, the total number of Covid-19 infections now exceeds 8 million, and more than 434,000 people have lost their lives since the start of the pandemic. Well, here in Europe, there's been a gradual drop in the number of new cases, and EU countries have this week been lifting border restrictions. Although today, the head of the French Health Ministry, Jérôme Salomon, said that not preparing for a second wave of coronavirus infections would be, and I quote, a major mistake. Well, there's evidence of exactly this, a dreaded second wave in Beijing right now, where a new outbreak, which has been traced back to a massive wholesale market, has resulted in dozens of new infections. Well, the authorities there have today raised the alert level. Well, for more, we can cross now to France 24's Charles Pellegrin, who joins us from Beijing. Charles, just tell us a little bit more about what the authorities have done and these new measures that have been put in place.
Absolutely. Extremely strong words from the Beijing authorities now for a few days, saying that this is a wartime period of the fight against this threat of a second wave of COVID-19, talking about a race against time to contain this new cluster of infections. And this Tuesday evening, the authorities of the city raising the emergency level from 3 to 2, which means that a number of the elementary and middle schools in the city will be shut down, and students will have to be doing their classes online. But there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between this discourse from the authorities, which is extremely alarmist, which is telling people to stay on their toes, with a number of local officials in the Fengtai district where this cluster of infections started, who were fired for letting this new cluster of infection appear. And the reality of this situation, which is that there are at this point at least 106 new infections in the city over the course of the last 5-6 days, at a time where in France, for example, just on Monday alone, there were 152 new confirmed cases at a time when France was lifting its lockdown. So important to put things in perspective here, but clearly this shows that the authorities here in Beijing, right next to the seat of power of the Chinese Communist Party, very concerned of seeing a new cluster of infections like Wuhan appear in the capital. So they're doing everything they can to stop it from happening. So that's why we're seeing this emergency response level being raised this Tuesday night.
Yeah, and you mentioned Wuhan. Of course, that was the believed source of the whole pandemic, a wildlife market in Wuhan. Again, a market. It's a wholesale market, fruit and veg market there in Beijing, which is thought to be the source of this latest cluster. I mean, what more have you got on the actual circumstances of this outbreak and the numbers of people involved, Charles?
Well, this particular outbreak was discovered with one man in his 50s last week on Thursday who went to the hospital. He was exhausted and he was tested for COVID-19, and it turns out he had it. And the authorities asked, did the tracking work that's required, and find out that he went to this Xinfadi market in the south of the capital, which is basically a huge wholesale market which distributes about 80% to 90% of all of the Chinese capital's fruits and vegetables. So a huge place with a lot of traffic. Just to give you an idea of the size of this place, it's about the size of 160 football pitches. So this is a huge place with a lot of traffic. So this is why the authorities were extremely concerned about the number of people that potentially could have been infected. And from that work of tracking in that market, they discovered links to other markets, and that's why the Haidian market in the northwest of the city has been closed as well. So right now, what seems to be the issue with these markets isn't necessarily any issue in terms of illegal trade of wild animals or health and safety problems, but really just the amount of traffic that there is in them and the number of people that go through them every day. Just really thousands of tons of agricultural produce go through the Xinfadi market every day. So that was what was concerning and worrying the authorities.
Yeah, big concern there. The prospect of a second wave of the pandemic. Thank you very much indeed for that update from Beijing. France 24's Charles Pellegrin. Thank you again.